There are debates in sports, and then there are debates that feel almost mythological, arguments that outgrow the very rings, courts, or fields where the athletes once performed. Mike Tyson versus Muhammad Ali is that level of fantasy matchup, a conversation piece that survives generations because it invites us to bend the rules of time. Barbershop regulars reenacted with animated jabs of the hand, online forums spawn thousand common threads within hours, and documentaries slip in sly references just to keep the spark alive. Two heavyweights separated by 20 years and radically different cultural backdrops stand in the collective imagination like superheroes from rival comic books. Fans don't merely ask who would win. They ask what the victory would say about power versus poetry, intimidation versus imagination, brute force versus tactical brilliance. In a world desperate for definitive answers, this riddle remains enticingly unsolved. Iron Mike, a force of nature. Mike Tyson, labeled Iron Mike, long before he ever lifted a professional belt, erupted onto the boxing landscape in the mid-1980s with the sudden violence of a thunderclap. At only 20 years old, he annexed the WBC heavyweight crown, becoming the youngest champion in the division's long, brutal history, and he did so with an aura that bordered on the primordial. Tyson's peekaboo guard, forged under the obsessive eye of Cus D'Amato, turned defense into coiled offense. His perpetual bobbing invited opponents to strike, then punished the attempt with hooks that sounded like a bat cracking on summer asphalt. He was a 5'10" wrecking ball in a division dominated by giants, yet he reduced taller, rangier men to trembling long sleeves of flesh and doubt. Crowds didn't watch Tyson fights so much as they braced for impact, knowing that a single sequence, slip, rise, uppercut, could erase an opponent's consciousness before the television commentators finished the sponsor rundown. The greatest, Muhammad Ali's brilliance. Opposite that tempest stands Muhammad Ali, the greatest, a man whose very cadence changed whenever a microphone was within reach. Ali's legacy isn't measured solely by belts or knockouts. It is braided into civil rights marches, anti-war protests, and the global lexicon of confidence. In the ring, his style defied physics for a heavyweight. Spring-loaded footwork carried him around slower adversaries as though he moved on polished ice, and his jab, thrown while gliding backward, worked almost like sonar, probing range while disorienting victims. Ali's showmanship was never empty. Every rhyme, wink, and shuffle served a tactical function, slipping through an opponent's psychological guard long before the first bell. When he beat Liston, pundits said it was speed. When he beat Foreman, they said it was sorcery. When he survived Frazier, they acknowledged it was indomitable will. Each triumph added a new dimension to the mythology of a fighter who seemed to rewrite the limits of what a heavyweight could dare. A study in contrasts. Lay their resumes side by side, and the contrasts jump off the page like red ink on white gloves. Tyson was forged in the foster homes and concrete corners of Brownsville, Brooklyn, where survival instincts sharpened teeth and temper alike. His ring persona felt almost prehistoric. Snarls, black trunks, no robe, zero frills. Boxing stripped to its violent core. Ali, by contrast, emerged from Louisville with a bright Olympic gold medal and a poet's tongue, reciting verse at weigh-ins and wielding charisma like a second pair of fists. Tyson devoured opponents with the urgency of a man racing against inner demons. Ali outthought and outlasted them, reveling in the theater of elongation. One sought brevity, the other mastered narrative. That polarity fascinates because it mirrors an eternal sporting question. Does overwhelming strength conquer sophisticated strategy, or does strategic brilliance neutralize raw power? Power and explosiveness on Tyson's side. Examining kinetic data, few heavyweights have ever generated the sheer force Tyson produced in tight spaces. At his peak, he fired hooks that registered north of 1,800 pounds of pressure, enough to dent modern headgear during training sessions. Speed amplified that power. Slow-motion replays reveal his fists covering the final 6 inches of travel almost faster than the eye can trace. The peekaboo stance accentuated leverage by loading his hips like springs, enabling him to turn a defensive weave into an offensive missile launch within a blink. Such violence produced a highlight reel littered with first-round obliterations. Berbick stumbling comically after 3 knockdowns, Michael Spinks frozen in existential dread before the opening jab landed. Tyson's early fights felt less like contests and more like predatory demonstrations, where the apex predator reminded the herd of its precarious standing. Ali's artistry of movement and adaptability. If Tyson's gift was the sudden removal of space, Ali's genius lay in the expansion of it. He fought as though the squared circle was twice its actual size, skating around opponents with a dancer's economy, forcing powerful punchers to lunge and miss until lactic acid seeped into their shoulders. Ali's jab was not just a punch, it was an instrument of disorientation. He flicked it while moving backward, sideways, sometimes downward, never allowing foes to set their feet. Yet what truly separates Ali is adaptability. Against the monstrous Liston, he relied on speed, peppering from angles. Years later in Zaire, he voluntarily shelled against the ropes, absorbing Foreman's artillery to drain his gas tank. Such tactical pivoting requires supreme ring IQ and a gambler's self-belief. Ali owned both in surplus, improvising on the grandest stages and proving that intelligence could be as lethal as pure horsepower. Early fury versus late mastery. The clash of timelines within a single bout renders this fantasy fight so magnetic. Tyson fought as though a hidden clock ticked loudly in his skull, a countdown to the moment when mystery vanished and technique might expose him. His knockout ratio in the first 3 rounds hovers near 75%, reflecting not just power but strategic intent. Finish early, avoid the chess match. Ali, conversely, understood that time was his ally. He measured opponents across the opening rounds like a tailor taking dimensions, learning tendencies, then tightening the noose once fatigue dulled reflexes. In Manila against Frazier, he survived hellish middle rounds only to emerge ruthless in the 14th. The rumble in the jungle further illustrated his timing mastery. He allowed Foreman to swing himself into exhaustion, then flipped the narrative with sudden ferocity. Should Tyson fail to land his meteor in those volatile opening frames, the orbit would gradually favor Ali's superior cardiovascular engine and in-fight. Mental fortitude and psychological games. More than muscles and game plans, great fights hinge on psychology. Ali weaponized words long before social media made taunting fashionable. He disrupted focus, flipped confidence into insecurity, and sowed seeds of doubt that sprouted mid-fight. When Liston refused to rise for round 7 in Lewiston, boasters showed Ali standing over him, screaming for proof of courage. Tyson's intimidation operated differently, silent but palpable. Opponents lost before the opening bell, eyes glassing over during stare-downs. Yet Tyson's armor showed cracks when he encountered resistance that did not wilt, as seen against Douglas and later Holyfield. Ali endured 3.5 years of exile for his anti-war stance, then returned to reclaim supremacy. That episode forged an unshakable core. One might argue that Ali's psychological resilience could outlast Tyson's fear aura, especially when the latter realized his opponent refused to be terrified. Opening rounds of the dream fight. Picture the imaginary bell in a jam-packed Madison Square Garden. Tyson crouches low, head weaving, shoulders twitching like a hunting cat, while Ali circles on the toes of feet that seem allergic to stillness. The first minute is a physics lesson. Tyson shortens the distance in diagonal bursts, throwing searing jabs to the torso to drop Ali's guard. Ali responds with radar-like counters, touching Tyson's forehead with a snapping jab, not for damage, but for data. A left hook whistles past Ali's chin. An inch of daylight prevents catastrophe and reminds the audience that danger sits in every pocket of this bout. Fans gasp at Tyson's menace, yet note that Ali's composure remains intact, a grin perhaps flashing as he whispers something only Tyson can hear. End of round 1. Adrenaline high, scoreboard narrow. The turning tide in the championship rounds. By round 6, perspiration slicks both torsos, yet their energies diverge. Tyson's breaths grow more audible, each exhale a signal that the knockout is late arriving. Ali, seeing the shift, plants himself just long enough to deliver 3-piece combinations, jab, cross, hook, then slips outside the return fire. Tyson still launches thunder, but his feet lag microseconds behind his intentions, allowing Ali escape routes that didn't exist earlier. In round 9, a swelling under Tyson's left eye testifies to Ali's accumulative jabs. The crowd senses it. The predator is tasting unfamiliar fatigue, and the poet warrior is sharpening the pen for his final stanza. Ali peppers the body now, mindful that a tired torso can't fuel explosive counters. Tyson swings on raw nerve, missing more than he lands, and every miss chips away at his psychological reservoir. Deciding the victor. Championship rounds 10, 11, 12 become a masterclass in attritional brilliance. Ali's footwork, still deceptively spree, ushers Tyson into angles where only one man can punch effectively. Tyson staggers forward, courage undimmed but coordination fraying, eating combinations that once would have bounced off his gloves. He responds with isolated bombs that graze Ali yet fail to detonate flush. Judges, tracking momentum, tally rounds that shift from crimson aggression to surgical control. When the final bell tolls, Tyson raises a glove in hopeful triumph. Yet, his gaze betrays uncertainty. Ali, perspiration glistening like stage lights on polished wood, raises both arms with the assurance of a man who has navigated stormy seas before. Scorecards read a unanimous decision for Muhammad Ali, close in the early tide, widening as the minutes stretched into deep water. The legacy lesson. This matchup will forever occupy the golden filing cabinet of what if, but its very contemplation illuminates boxing's twin pillars: the irresistible power of youth and the inexhaustible cunning of experience. Tyson symbolizes the raw, visceral appeal of pugilism, an eruption of kinetic danger that demands immediate respect. Ali stands for the chess master's approach, proving that intellect and adaptability can amplify physical gifts into something transcendent. Their hypothetical clash underscores that greatness is multifaceted. It is forged in gyms but polished through trials, both inside and outside the ring. When distant generations revisit this debate, they may side with power or poetry, but they will ultimately celebrate the towering legacies of two men who redefined what it means to be a heavyweight champion. If this video sparked your boxing imagination, give the like button a stiff jab and subscribe for more dreamfight analyses and historical breakdowns. Drop your scorecards in the comments. Did Tyson's early storm earn him the edge? Or did Ali's late brilliance secure the crown in your eyes? Until our next bell sounds, protect yourself at all times and stay ready to rumble.